Greetings, one and all. I wanted to discuss a bit of wisdom. I had some people talking to me about knowledge, and someone got in touch with me about how they can transmute their knowledge into wisdom, because that's what we're supposed to be doing with all this knowledge we're gaining. I see a lot of people with a lot of knowledge, but they're not turning it into wisdom. They have lots of facts, they have lots of ideas, they have lots of what they're being told by other people is happening, but they're not pondering upon it themselves and turning that knowledge into some kind of wisdom that's germinating within them. Instead, they want to be told what to believe, and they're not working with it themselves of what they think is happening, what is occurring, what they can do with this knowledge, because knowledge should be being used for wise ways. We should be walking a wise path. And with knowledge, we can be given all kinds of knowledge, but we have to verify it and check that it is true knowledge. There's obviously a lot of fake knowledge out there as well, or knowledge that's not quite attuned properly. And we also see a lot of quotes being put up on the internet all the time by people, you know, these supposed wise quotes to help us with our past, which is all well and good, as long as you're actually contemplating what these quotes are telling you and not having them taken out of context. Context is obviously a very important part of what we are learning in this knowledge seeking, knowledge finding path. But with the knowledge, we can all be too up here in the head, too intellectual, and we're not feeling what it is that we're trying to learn. We're not understanding in all aspects. We're just trying to understand intellectually. And I've been talking to a few people in these last few weeks who I've noticed seem to be lacking a bit of faith, and instead just coming from a materialistic point of view of everything, when we should be coming from a spiritual and soulful point of view and putting those kinds of perspectives to the knowledge that we're gaining. And then I was reading one of Steiner's lectures, which was actually, it's not from a book, it's from this magazine, The Golden Blade. And this lecture is called The Great Virtues. It was given on the 31st of January 1915. And I thought this was quite important, so I wanted to pass it on to you. And it's not just about knowledge, it's about what we do with the knowledge, what we judge of the people who give us knowledge, maybe not judging ourselves and whether we're being sincere in our path. But anyway, let me read the quote and we'll take it from there. Life has been worthless for us if we pass through decades and still judge something that we have experienced in just the same way as we thought about it earlier in our lives. If we pass through life in such a way, we are most remote from wisdom. Karma may have brought it about that in youth we grew angry and condemned this or that human action. If we retain this quality, we have made poor use of our lives. We have used them well, supposing we formed harsh judgments in our youth, if at a later stage of life we do not judge harshly, but with understanding and forgiveness, if we make the effort of wishing to understand. And that's what I was trying to come to with this, everybody collecting all this knowledge and throwing it at me, but not actually understanding what it is that they're picking up. I can see people are trying to understand, and it's through this understanding that we begin to develop it into wisdom. But he's talking here about, I think, patterns and programming, really, isn't he? We grow up in our lives, when we're young, we react to a lot of things instead of act, but it's making sure we're not still reacting in those kinds of ways as we grow older. We should be changing. We shouldn't be the same person we were when we were a teenager, unless we were fully harmonized and centered and an awake person. But hands up those that are like that. You don't need to watch this video. Most of us, I look back at myself in the past, just cringe at who I used to be. But we shouldn't be letting that drag us down. But at the same time, we shouldn't still be that same person if we're doing this work. We should be changing, whether it's the Steiner work, the Gurdjieff work, it should be changing us. Like the getting knowledge and turning it into wisdom, this working on us should be changing us into a better, more harmonized person, a more waking up person. That's another important thing. I keep having people telling me, I'm awake. You're not awake, you're waking up. People that are awake are people like Christ and Buddha and possibly even Gurdjieff. I believe he was awake. So are we still doing the same patterns that we were doing earlier in our lives? Or are we now able to see our way through, and are we navigating our way through life with more wisdom, and that we're acting and not reacting to things? They're all interesting stuff to think about. Right, so he goes on. If we have the character that from birth some things aroused furious anger in us, and if when we are old we no longer grow angry as in our youth, but our anger has left us and we have grown gentler, then we have used life in accordance with wisdom. Now, I know many people of a certain age who are definitely still act like children and act like teenagers and haven't changed at all. I also have a lot of people I know of a older age who say, oh, I've mellowed out, I've matured, I've calmed down. And I'd like to think maybe they've developed themselves. They might not have developed themselves in a spiritual path, but they've seen life in a new way and wanted to be not an easier life. It's well, yeah, an easier life, but they've improved themselves. But there are a lot of people out there that still act like children and teenagers as they grow older. And this is something for us to think about ourselves. Do you still react to things in the same way that you did when you was younger? Or are you able to be more mature about it and see what it is that presses your buttons, or as Gurdjieff would say, you know, treads on your corns, presses on your corns? If we were materialists in our youth, but then allowed ourselves to experience what our time could bring us as revelations from the spiritual world, then we have used our life in accordance with wisdom. If we close ourselves to the revelations of the spiritual world, we have not used our life in accordance with wisdom. Now, obviously, Steiner talks a lot about connecting with the spiritual world and with the higher hierarchies and the angels, and, you know, working against the dark forces, redeeming them. But people on a spiritual or soulful path do normally change themselves because they can see their own faults. So they want to change that so that they become more attuned to what life is throwing at them, how they can deal with it. And through this is having obviously the knowledge. We can all read these self-help books, but are we turning that knowledge that them self-help books is telling us, are we changing that into wisdom and using it in our lives? These are things that we should be able to look upon ourselves and hopefully give a big yes and a big thumbs up and say, yes, everything, I'm a different person, I'm a better person as I've grown older. From the Steiner point of view, he likes to say that this whole spiritual science is to help us connect with the higher realms and the other realms. Remember, the materialists are not interested in other realms, other worlds, other beings. They just see this world for what it is to them. They see nothing past it. In fact, I know a few people on a spiritual path that don't see past what's going on in the material world, and they're the people I think that are just wearing it as a badge. But we have to look at it as to, what are we doing with ourselves? Are we, you know, like whether it's meditations or sittings or just taking those few moments of just clearing our minds, being at one with the world and the universe. It's something else that Steiner and Gurdjieff both talk about, is getting to know this planet, be a part of this planet, be aware you're on this living being. And that's evolving, we're evolving, and we're all helping those streams go along as we're doing this work. Steiner goes on, to be enriched in this way and to achieve a wider horizon, we can call the use of life in accordance with wisdom. What spiritual science seeks to give us is able to help us in opening ourselves towards life in order to grow wiser. Wisdom is something which strongly opposes human egoism. Wisdom is something which always reckons with the course of universal events. We let ourselves be instructed by the course of universal events because this liberates us from the narrow judgment made by our ego. And our ego is trying to keep us in the material world, isn't it? You know, from a Gurdjieff point of view, I suppose it's like the personality. And with all them different eyes in us, as Gurdjieff tells us, we have all these different eyes: the eye for work, the eye for your friends, the eye for your social life, the eye for when you're sitting at home doing nothing. That eye that wants to do the work, whether it's Steiner or Gurdjieff, that eye that wants to do that, we need to strengthen and be the one that helps us stay on the right path. Seek knowledge, be the truth seeker you want to be, and turn that knowledge that you discover into the wisdom that Steiner goes on to warn us about later in this lecture, which is called The Great Virtues. We have in German a good expression for a man who refuses to become wise. We call him a Philistine. A Philistine is a man who resists the development of wisdom, who wants to remain as he is in his whole life through without altering his opinions. And we've all met people like that, people who will not look at things in a new light, adamant that they're right, even though when they know they're wrong. You know, these smarty pants, they are quite funny and amusing to be with. But I obviously they're close-minded. They're so narrow-minded that they don't want to look at other things. We don't want to be stuck in our ways. A man who seeks to become wise makes the effort to carry over the work which he has done and stored up in the course of earlier incarnations. The wiser we become, the more we bring over from earlier incarnations into the present. And if we do not wish to become wise, so that we leave barren the wisdom developed in earlier incarnations, there is then one who comes to saw it off. Saw it off. And who is that doesn't want to, who notices when people don't want to work upon themselves or develop themselves or use the knowledge and turn it into wisdom? That person, that being is Ahriman. No one likes it better than Ahriman that we fail to grow wiser. We had the power to do it. We have gained far, far more in early incarnations than we believe. We won far more during the times in which we passed through the old conditions of clairvoyance. Everyone could become much wiser than he does become. No one has the excuse that he could not bring much over from the past. And I think even from your own this life, what you've been doing in this life, all the wisdom we've been gaining, the knowledge we've been gaining, we can turn into wisdom. And if we don't, Ahriman comes for you. And Ahriman is here to distract us from our spiritual paths. To become wise means that one develops what has been won in earlier incarnations in such a way that it fills us in this incarnation. And it reminds me of what Gurdjieff said of, this could be the one last life you have the opportunity to do this work in. Or, if you come back in another life in the future, you might not remember this work. So I'd like to think that you take it with you if you continue with it. I know many of us, and I've spoken to various people about it, they've had since childhood or that spark in them. They know there's something different. They maybe haven't quite found their path yet, but they know that they've got a truth seeker inside them that just wants to get out. Some people find it later in life, or sometimes that truth seeker inside them comes out later in life, possibly because of the way they were brought up. So they've been led down a materialistic life and they continue that way until something happens. Gurdjieff normally says it's a shock or a trauma of some kind. And even Steiner says that in places. A trauma wakes them up suddenly and they realize that they can follow a path of knowledge and wisdom. So with that little bit nugget of knowledge that I've passed on to you, hopefully you're all keeping your paths open to study and find new knowledge and work with it and verify everything, be the truth seeker you are supposed to be. So from a sort of a wise person to another wise person, that's you. Peace and out. Till next time. Thank you for watching.